Hello, my name is Laura Braddick, and I'm Assistant Director of Communications for Content and Collaboration at the University of Alabama in the Division of Strategic Communications. Thank you for tuning into this on-demand session for the 2021 Virtual SECCA Conference titled Content is Key, Finding the Right Mix for Your Internal Newsletters. In this session, I'm going to take you inside UA's official internal newsletters and talk specifically about what content we use, how we use it, and where we get it from. So I hope you'll be able to take away some ideas and concepts to elevate your own internal newsletters. So let's get started. Let's start by learning a little bit about the University of Alabama's internal newsletters. Inside UA is the official newsletter for UA students, faculty, and staff, and it's compiled by hand by our communications team under the Division of Strategic Communications. And the goals of Inside UA are simple: to keep campus informed and engaged. So sure, we use it to brag about the university and our people, but we also include content that helps readers have a better, easier experience as part of the university community. So whether that's reminding them where to find the list of university holidays, or when it's time to renew their parking permits, or what the food truck schedule is like for the week. We really want this to be the source that people go to for everything that they need to know about the university and what's going on at the university. We have two versions of Inside UA, one for faculty and staff and one for students, so we can target the content to each of those audiences. Both newsletters, or both versions of the newsletter, are sent once per week on Wednesday mornings, and we send those using MailChimp. But we also, from time to time, send plain text versions of the newsletter whenever there's a critical or timely announcement that needs to be made to campus before the scheduled Wednesday edition. Our open rates for the student newsletter is about 47% on average, and the click rate is about 3%. Faculty and staff is similar, but it's slightly different, with an average open rate of 44% and an average click rate of 10%. So what kind of content do we put in Inside UA? When it comes to newsletter content, it's all about finding the right balance and mix. There are the need-to-know messages, the nice-to-know messages, and the strategic messages that you're trying to get across to the audience. And just like social media content, you have to mix in what the audience wants to see with what you want them to see. So for Inside UA, we try to strike the balance with the following: university news and achievements. So this includes everything from rankings to research grants obtained to new academic programs to new research centers, things like that. These news stories can fall either into that need to know or the nice to know category, or both. Profiles. We feature profiles and stories on individuals and groups of individuals who have won prestigious scholarships, for examples, or awards, or just strictly have great stories to tell about their experience on campus and the great things that they're doing. Announcements. This is the critical and timely info that we include. Everything from reminders about compliance training to wellness program benefits for faculty and staff, and things like deadlines to apply for graduation to technology updates for students. And then there's the fun stuff. When appropriate, we like to include lighter content that really makes people smile or gets them engaged. And this is often what many people enjoy seeing and clicking the most, like scenic pictures of campus or pictures of animals and pets, videos from student events, or articles about students' favorite meals to get on campus, for example. All put together, we find that this mix, from news to fun stuff to critical announcements and profiles, really works well for our weekly newsletter format. So out of all that great content, what's the most popular? What gets the most clicks and the most views? I think by far, stories about peers seem to be some of the most popular content that we see regularly in our newsletter. And whether that's students clicking on stories about fellow students or faculty and staff clicking on stories about their fellow faculty and staff, people love to see and read about the achievements of their peers. The example I've shown here, we recently published the newest class of our Capstone Men and Women, which is our campus ambassador group. That story alone had over 1,300 clicks in the student edition, which is approximately 110% higher than the average click on any link in the newsletter. So that's just an example of what people love to see, especially when it's paired with a beautiful picture of happy, smiling faces like this one was. Another very popular types of stories is food and parking. Everybody loves food, and also everybody's very attuned to parking issues on campus. So where to find parking, what you need to know, any changes, always gets lots of clicks. In June, we recently published a story about summer parking options in our city town center and also new restaurant options. So the combination of those, both these two hot topics, got a lot of clicks for our newsletter. In fact, we had over 2,000 in the faculty and staff edition alone. The student edition was not far behind that as well, which is again about 120% higher than the average click on any link in our newsletter. And then one of the more unexpected things that we see is very frequently a popular item is actually a call for research volunteers. We keep a running list of active studies that are seeking participants on our UA News Center, and every time there's a new addition to that, we include a blurb about the study and what they're seeking and include a link to that webpage. And as I said, that link always has a lot of engagement. Recently, it was the second most clicked link in the entire newsletter. So those are the types of content that get the most clicks.
So what do we do with our content? How do we lay it all out in the newsletter? Like any piece of marketing, branding, or communication material, having a consistent design and layout is very important. And while we have lots of important messages that we're trying to get across, we still have to make decisions about what's the most important and have a hierarchy to the information, because it can't all go at the top, right? So this is how we designed our newsletter inside UA, to be consistent and have that hierarchy. Now this image that you see is a very zoomed out all the way image of what the newsletter looks like. It does not look like this when it appears in your inbox, but this is to give you a view so you can see how we've designed our newsletter, how we've broken down the hierarchy of it, and how we try to break up the visual aesthetic of the newsletter. So I'll go by each section very quickly. First, at the top of the newsletter, we always have 3 to 4 features, stories that from the UA News Center that we try to highlight. And again, sometimes these are the same for faculty and staff, sometimes they're different. We always try to include very strong images. Those are important for getting engagement, particularly photos that have faces. And we try to really stay away from using generic stock images as much as possible. Next up, we have announcements. Again, these are those critical, very timely, important reminders and announcements that come from all over campus. We try to keep these very short and sweet and to the point, and always have a link to somewhere on the UA website that contains more information that readers can go about to click and learn. This helps keep the newsletter short and contained, rather than including a very lengthy announcements or several lengthy announcements in each newsletter. We always try to include at least one advertisement, and that's in quotation marks because they're really not paid advertisements. They're just images that we place in from our department or others. But this is an additional flexible way to promote any kind of events or important information or any other kind of messages from campus that we want to promote that helps break up sort of the visual look of the email. You typically try and use it to break up paragraphs of text. So we typically place it under announcements or before the announcements. It helps encourage people to keep scrolling. Next we have events. Here we always try to include at least 3 to 5 to 6 sort of high-level critical key events, again targeting students or faculty or both, depending on the nature of the event, that have kind of the highest or the widest appeal, since this is a campus-wide email. We keep it, again, very short and sweet with the title of the event, the date, the time, the place, and then always link to the university events calendar, where again, readers can click to learn all the details they need to know and how to register for these events. In case you missed it, this section is dedicated solely for any important messages that have gone out to the campus since the last newsletter that weren't included in the last newsletter. So this is a way for us to reinforce some important messages. that we want the campus to take note of and pay attention to, especially in the past year with any updates to COVID-19 regulations and guidelines. This section was always the key place for that. And again, it gave readers a consistent space. They knew and know what to look for in this section. Close to the end of the newsletter, we always have a video of the week. And if we don't have a video to share, we do a photo of the week. This is, again, a way to share kind of some fun or lighter content. Sometimes it's also critical, important content, or it's reinforcing a video that was sent out to the campus the week prior. And again, this gives us the flexibility to, if we don't have a video for, say, faculty and staff that week, we can include a photo, but do a video for the student edition as well. And then at the end, we always include a very short did you know fact. This can be about an university achievement, like such as this example here about Goldwater scholars. Sometimes we include facts and figures about the history of the university. And we just decided to incorporate this, again, as some of that kind of light, fun content, but also helps educate our audience, faculty, staff, and students about the history of the university, so they might close the newsletter walking away with something they didn't previously know about the university, or a tidbit of news that they hadn't seen or read yet before. So that's what Inside UA looks like. As I said, being consistent and having a hierarchy is very important for any newsletter design, but so is having flexibility and being flexible. And this is one of the things that we love about MailChimp, is that it gives us this flexibility to make changes to our design when there are times that we need to do so. For example, back in March, when the South was experiencing, its regular tornado season, we took the opportunity when the severe weapon happened to fall around the time our newsletter was going out to include this call out for safety reminders for safety weathers. Now, this is not the only message that we have related to weather safety. We have many, many ways of communicating to campus about that. But we wanted to be able to call attention to it, include it in the newsletter, and call attention to it in a way because it's sort of emergency or critical information that people needed to know. And with the MailChimp design, we were able to slip this in below the features and above the announcements and create a special design block for it. So it would catch people's attention more easily. Again, flexibility in how content is presented. A feature story doesn't always have to go in our feature story section. For example, we had a story just a few weeks ago about a mural project that was done at a new hotel in town by a group of alumni, faculty, and students. And it had great visual images with it, this beautiful mural. And but we had several other feature stories already slated to go on the top of the newsletter. Well, we didn't happen to have any new photos or videos that week for our section at the bottom, so we created a photo of the week. We dropped in this great picture of the mural and linked to the news story. So again, we don't always have to be so rigid with the sections of our newsletter. We can really get creative with how we move around and display the content. News story isn't always going to be a feature. Announcement might be an ad. There are many different things that we can do. For example, with our differing from versions, using content in different ways in different versions of the newsletter. One item of news, for example, the Dean's List for fall of 2020, in the student edition, it appeared at the top of the newsletter as a feature story, but in the faculty and staff version, it was just simply a very short link in the announcements with no image attached to it. So we can, again, with the way we have designed our newsletter, elevate things in different issues depending on its importance or relevance to each audience. I want to talk briefly about where we get the content for our newsletter. Where do the ideas come from? Where do we get these images and stories and whatnot? First of all, we have a form for submitting content that we distribute to all our campus communicators campus-wide and make sure that the community is aware that they can submit ideas for UA News Center stories or for our Inside UA newsletter. We also include the link to this form in the actual newsletter, and it never fails that every time we send the newsletter, we at least get 2 or 3 submissions right after it's sent from people that see it and go, oh hey, I have an announcement or a story I'd like to include. So this is a very important way that we collect content. Social media, also just following and paying attention not to just what the main University of Alabama account is doing, but what other accounts on campus are doing. We've got great communicators across campus that are very busy and are pushing out things to their audiences, but not always thinking that they should submit it for Inside UA. So sometimes we're able to spot these things and highlight them and then reach out to the contact person and see, hey, is this something that you would like to see included in Inside UA, which we distribute to every single student on campus every Wednesday. And almost always they're very eager to do so. Departmental newsletters. We also subscribe to the numerous publications and e-newsletters that individual departments and offices across campus send out, and we get a lot of ideas for our content through there. Our UA Master Events Calendar is another great source where we not only learn about events for the events section, but announcements, holidays, and deadline reminders and things like that. And then having a great crop of evergreen content is also something that we strive to keep on file. These are announcements like information about Lost and Found, or weather updates. This, for example, the image on here, saving money at the soup store ad, things like that you can use year-round for when there might be a particularly slow news week or slow announcements week, for example, in the summertime. This is great to have this folder of content to always go back to that you can recycle and reuse to keep your newsletter from week to week very robust. That concludes my presentation. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to this presentation. I really, really hope that you learned something, that you enjoyed seeing, getting an inside look into Inside UA. If you have questions, feel free to email me, laura.braddick@ua.edu, and show me what you're doing. Add my email to your newsletter list and spam me with all your newsletters. I would love to see what other SEC communicators are doing. Thanks again.